Welcome to the Corporate Treasury 101 podcast. This is the second part of our full interview with Philip Costa and Jan-Willem Attevelt from Automation Boutique, where we will get to know more about robotic process automation and the specificities of it. Philip Costa is the founder of Automation Boutique and an accomplished automation manager specialized in finance and treasury. Jan-Willem Attevelt is an expert in navigating tools like RPA, APIs, and AI, which, along with his extensive treasury experience, enables him to steer businesses toward optimization. In the episode of today, expect to learn how do RPA work exactly, what are the required skills to set up an RPA, whether somebody can, with no skills at all related to RPA, easily maintain an established RPA process, what are the problems and challenges that come with those kind of tools, and like always, much more. Our conversation with Philip and Jan-Willem was really cool. Those two are doing things in the treasury space that we don't see everywhere. Plus, they have this no-nonsense approach that Hussar and I really enjoy. We hope you will enjoy this episode too. And if that is the case, and when you think about how you found our podcast, chances are that it was through word of mouth, social media, or a recommendation from your favorite podcast platform. And this is our only request to you. The only way we can get more and more amazing guests and get more people to learn about treasury is thanks to you. So if you enjoy what you hear and maybe learn a thing or two, please consider following the show, leaving a review, or sharing this episode to help others discover it too. And with all that being said, please welcome Philip Costa and Jan-Willem Attevelt. We would like to get into the nitty-gritty of RPA. Could you maybe start by breaking down how the RPA works exactly? Like now, not how we use it, but more how does the RPA work in the details?
It's a broad question. I hope I'll give you the right answers. Very high level, how you have three components. One is Studio or a editor where you, as a programmer, you program it. You would have an orchestration environment which will keep in mind on which bot needs to do what. And then you have the final robot executing different tasks on either a virtual machine or local machine, attended or unattended flow. When it comes, maybe the most interesting, and maybe that was the origin of your question, let's narrow down on the robot actually doing the different steps. When it comes to that, the robot will be interacting with different applications on your screen. So we said it typically would interact with the interface, with the visual interface of any application. And it has, again, two ways of doing that. One is robust, which is we always want to do. The other one is a bit crappy, which we try to avoid as much as possible. I'll start with the crappy one, and that is just looking at how things look like. So I'm looking for a button clicked submit, and the button is gray and it's 2 centimeters wide by 1 centimeter tall. So I could have a robot looking for a button which looks like this description and then click on it, which is a bit how we do it as humans. We're looking for things on the screen. But that is not ideal, because what if the button size changes? What if I change the resolution on my screen? What if a little word is different? Anything is very delicate way of doing things. So that's not our preferred way. The other way is the robot will go under the skin of the applications, and I will try to understand what is the technical setup, what is the technical selector of that application, screen, or whatever. And it will be, when I'm programming it, I'm telling it, instead of look for a button 2 centimeters by 1 with this text, I'll be telling it, look for a button whose technical name is submit or 1, for example. And then wherever that button is, no matter the color, the size, the whatever, the robot will look for it and will find it, which makes programming bots much more robust. And then on top of that, you have interaction with all different things. So if I need to do an API call, for example, typically, as we said before, I would have to set it up quite difficult in a quite complex way. Now, as a programmer, I would just have a connector which I can drag in my flow. I put in the key parameters that I want, and the bot will execute it. And then on the back of that, when the robot is executing, will do its own magic, doing the API requests, fetching it back, handling the errors, and all of that. And I get to enjoy the key benefits.
Super clear. How do you set up and maintain an RPA then? Because we are talking about software, as you mentioned at the beginning of the episode. But how do you go from nothing to having an RPA integrated under the skin of your systems and software then? Like what are the tools out there?
Yeah, that is a bit vendor specific, but there are many out there, and they all have a bit like the same setup which I mentioned. They have a studio orchestrator and a bot. So in studio, you can even do what you could do with macro recording. So you record your screen, and the robot will get the piece of code of what you did, and then you can edit it from that. Just like macro, you tend to get a bit of a crappy code out of it, but it could be one way of doing, or at least to getting some parts of it. But you would start with replicating the step and programming it, often, as I mentioned, with a low code and put in the different steps. To do things robustly, we have frameworks out there as well, which help us handle what happens if the automation doesn't go exactly as planned. For example, Chrome crashed. So it would be silly for the robot to crash immediately. We want the robot to try closing, just like IT 101, close and open again. We can tell the bot, if something crashes in this step, do the same. Close and open again. So we put our code in frameworks which will have different states of the machine. So it will have a startup state where it will open the applications, we'll get a get information and get transaction data state, we'll get the data that it needs. They will have a process state, and then it'll have a cleanup state. And then depending on what happens at different states, it can retry and it can try to recover. So we would then program in this framework, in this piece of code. We would then, to do it properly, you would then want to have someone else test it, probably the client, test it in their environment. If they're happy with that, you would want someone other than the developer, typically, move it from the development environment to the production environment. And once it's deployed in the production environment, any end user who has that bot, who has been assigned that bot, they can launch it if it's an unattended bot, or if it's an attended bot, or if it's an unattended bot, any robot available at a given time when the trigger is run can run that automation then.
And so what would be the prerequisites for a company to implement RPA? So it goes to the specificities of system vendors, I understand, but like, is there any interest for the moms and pops baker at the corner of the street shop to implement an RPA?
It depends a little bit. Some RPA licenses come at a cost, especially the more advanced ones. So they're not, there's some cost involved. Sometimes you have it included in some of the Office subscriptions, so then it's already a little bit more cheap. So we usually always look like, okay, what software licenses are already in-house within the company? For example, Microsoft offers an automation solution as well. And then it can be, a solution that would be suitable even for very small companies. We are currently building solutions for ranging from very small companies from a few million turnover up till billions of turnover. So it's basically suitable for every company that has repetitive tasks that need to be performed on the computer.
Yeah, and even smaller. We have one client. She's a friend of ours. I think her turnover is around 80 to 100K, and she's loving it. Like all her order management, her invoicing is now automated at a fraction of the cost that would cost her to employ someone to do it as well. So one of the big advantages of RPA is that it's quick to develop, quick to deploy, and it's cost effective. It is cheap. Let's just use simple words. Sometimes even free, depending on your size and then depending on what you need to do with it.
Makes a lot of sense. So I guess at the end of the day, it comes down to the benefit case, right? All the savings you're going to make in terms of, time spent by FTEs or human resources, can they be performed eventually faster and better by a robot that will cost a fraction of all this? So it comes down to this.
And that is great for us because we also tend to for us, there is enough work out there. So we really like to be quite transparent about things. If we don't think that RPA is the best way, or you're not going to be having a positive benefit, we will tell you clear, like this, we would not do it like this if we were you. In fact, our most successful project some years ago was a project where we ended up not doing anything at all. We're just sitting around the table with different departments, two departments talking to each other, wanting to automate a given report. And we were thinking, okay, which way? RPA? Do we put it on SharePoint? We have a link in SharePoint, whatever. And then we just started asking questions. Why do you need this report anyway? And then we said, because of this and this, because that team needs it. And then that team asked, yeah, but what do you do with it? Well, actually, we send it to that other team. So we gave a call to the other team. It turned out that they had been doing this report for years, but no one in the end really cared for it. Or rather, the cost of not doing it was really negligible. So in the end, we decided just, you know what, let's skip the whole thing. We don't do it. And we went home, no bot. It was a bit of a shitty day for us, but still we had good coffee and a nice interaction. So RPA is one of the tools, but not necessarily the best tool. And if you can eliminate the process, just eliminate it.
Wow. So I really, really like this approach. So that's great. I think that's focusing on the value you bring to your clients, right? But so then instead of like saying, do not do it at all and just eliminate the process, what are the other solutions that can come to your mind if it's not an RPA? Like when you say, if it's not the right solution to implement, we say it. So one of the possibilities is indeed to say, guys, we just don't need that process. But in case they still need it, but RPA is not necessary, what would it be then? What could you implement?
Yeah, maybe that's good to highlight a bit how we usually start because, a lot of automations we are doing involve Excel, for example. So actions are taking place in Excel and then data needs to be taken from some sources, for example, a treasury management system, an ERP system, and then it needs to be loaded in Excel. There need to be some data transformations in Excel, and then there needs to be a certain output. And then we usually start with the 80-20 rule, like, suppose you do the data extraction manually, but you put the value extracted from the system in a certain folder. You click a button, all the transformations that need to be done are done in Excel. The output is there how you want it. So that whole piece of work is basically automated. But it's for 20%, from the total cost, but it saves you like 80% of the work you normally have to do. And that final 20%, if you want to automate that as well, the data extraction, only then you need to start adding an RPA solution on top of that. So that's, you don't always need an RPA solution to get great results and great time savings in a very short time frame. It's a bit case by case, of course, but this is, I think, a nice example where we see that RPA is not always needed or the preferred solution to start with.
And we are aware that recommending using Excel is controversial, to say the least, and is quite far from the usual trend that you would expect from a company like Automation Boutique. It would be much easier for us to have a motto say, you need to eliminate Excel, don't use it, you need to move away of that. And that is true to some extent. Excel does have a number of issues, number of errors, but what we see is that the majority of those, we need to see we see two things. One, the majority of these errors and the fallbacks actually using Excel in the wrong way. And there are a number of bugs and issues in Excel which are they're not Excel's fault. You're just using it how it was not meant to be, or you're not using the right tool within Excel for how it's meant to be. And the other thing that we also see is that there is a huge amount of resistance against abandoning Excel. So we can either go against that or we can embrace it. And one of the big things that we do in automation projects is getting people on board, getting people excited and seeing the benefits of it instead of going against the flow. You often need a bit of a top-down approach to invest in automation, but you definitely need a bottom-up buy-in. Otherwise, it's really not going to succeed. So if we can use, as Jan-Willem said, a few queries in Excel, we can get 80-20 benefit, and then we can move on from there. And the last thing I'd like to say, if from the, say, 80% benefit that we're releasing, we want to spend some of that on teaching and training the people involved on how to use Excel better. So they don't need to rely on us. They will get the skills and they will stop doing the errors, mistakes, and they can maintain or they can handle the automation or other automations independently with some great tools which are out there. And one that I would like to highlight is not today's session, but Power Query. It's a hidden gem in Excel. That is the engine of Power BI, again, another Microsoft tool within Excel that no one knows about. And you can do so much and so well in a clear and robust way.
So everyone has to go and learn Power Query now. It's good to know. If I have a department, right, that I want to implement RPA in, what are the skills that I need to get it going? Like me as a non-technical, non-computer science or engineer or anything like this, what do I need to upskill myself in to be able to start thinking about implementing RPA in my processes? What would you say would set me up for success, even if I'm going to bring in a third party to implement it?
Well, again, there are many vendors out there. Some of them, or many of them, they also have free trainings available, which are really good. So the first step that we usually recommend to our clients is go and sign up to this academy, or even there's a lot of free content on YouTube. There are many books, and follow a few trainings and try it out. We typically advise him to skip even the most basic or the citizen developer flavor, to go straight to the foundation developer flavor, which will give them, I think, the right tools without confusing too much. So that's something you could do already. It's free, it's well organized, and it will get you the first basic skills.
We'll put some in the show notes, actually, for the listeners. Perhaps if you could share some, we can put them into the show notes of the podcast.
Yeah, when advising on an RPA solution, for example, we use Gartner's Magic Quadrant for RPA, and which vendors are the leaders, and every year it changes a bit. And there we usually see, a few being very outstanding, and those also happen to have the greatest learning content online. So if you could make the time to learn, you can get to a pretty advanced level. Without paying any training costs, except for your time.
Yeah, well, we can even mention it, perhaps like it's public information. If you get the latest Magic Quadrant, which is not from us, it's really independent reviews, you will see that UiPath is year after year always number one. And I think that's also due to their strategy, where they started with a community edition of RPA as a solution, which anyone can or could download for free. Play around, you can follow the academy, and it's exactly the same as the enterprise version, well, very close to the enterprise version. So your skills are immediately transferable to your working environment. Just the licensing will be different. So follow that. There is free training, free tutorials on UiPath itself. You can learn a bunch. If you want to learn the other ones, Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, there's a bunch of YouTube content. Microsoft is a rising star in the RPA environment, not quite as good as UiPath. If you are in the Microsoft environment only, so SharePoint, Microsoft Lists, Microsoft Forms and whatnot, then Microsoft RPA, or the Power Platform, how they call it, is also good. And even there you have a lot of content and training that you can follow.
Super cool. All right, we'll link them definitely in the show notes below. That's if I want to get started, right? So I perhaps learn a little bit of the basics, understand the processes, how it works, using these trainings, contact a third party, most likely to help me implement it, maintaining it ongoing. Again, to a department or company that you would say, yes, an RP would be applicable to them, but really they don't have any strong systems in place already to be able to maintain that. How do you get started being able to maintain that?
That is, again, quite easy. Well, there are different angles to this question. One, from a technology point of view, all these vendors make it really quite easy for you. Until a few years ago, when I started, we need to have, for example, orchestration. You need to have it on a server. You need to get your own server space. You need to install it, deploy it, and all of that, and maintain it. Today, they all offer cloud solutions. So you don't need to worry about that. At least you don't need any IT skills. You don't need any installation overhead, any of that. You just click a button, you have it deployed on a secured cloud space, and it just works. So that's the technical side. Short answer, really easy. That's not the problem. Don't worry about it. On an organizational side, there it depends. Depends where you are on your journey. If you're doing your first automations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 automations, your core objective is not so much focused on structuring things, but you want to lay the right foundation. So do things well. Don't get too, so that means use the right framework, start having a development environment in your orchestrator, but don't be too worried on how to set things up, because the objective is to get you excited, get the people around you excited, and get your organization a bit familiar with what is happening. you get to a point where you need to move on that stage, and then you need to get your risk management, your compliance, your legal department a bit more involved, because a few questions are going to start arising. Who is this user, this robot? How do we administer it? Whose responsibility is it if things go wrong? So then you need to start structuring a little bit the whole organization of robots. And there would be a good opportunity to start thinking, you want to set up a small center of excellence, how do you want it organized, and whatnot. But take it step by step, and then everything will be fine.
Okay, makes sense. And what would come for somebody who got an RPA installed, right? Just in the department, he was not in charge, rather, or she, of the implementation, neither the maintenance, but all of a sudden needs it. I mean, it's added as one of its responsibilities. Is it easy to maintain an RPA? Like, if we talk about a bot that just goes into a banking portal to take informations, feed your Excel spreadsheet and get your report all done, for somebody who's just arriving once everything is already there, is it easy to get a hand of it? I'm asking the question because, so from my personal experience with VBA and Excel macros, you can somehow understand, right? You just get into the Excel, you do your own macro, you save it, you see what it makes in code and so on. That's how we learn. Is it the same for RPAs, or do you really need knowledge basis in order to get there?
Yeah, I think given the low code way of how it is created, it's different blocks, and it's fairly easy to at least derive from what kind of text is in the block to see what that step exactly does. So I think if you have just a little bit of technical expertise, not that much, like how a code is built up, you have to start on the top and finish at the bottom, and you can basically visually see the different steps. So if you need to make a small adjustment, for example, a file name is changed, or I don't know, it's fairly easy to detect in which step does that take place, and how can I change it. Building a new automation from the ground up, that requires a little bit of more knowledge, I think, but making a very small change in an existing robot is not that hard, I think. Depends, of course, on the exact solution implemented, but in general, it's easier to read than a visual basic code, I think.